Hello, everyone listening to us. You are also being joined by people on Facebook who are watching us. So that's an option for you as well if you ever want to use it. Now, this is your creative journey that you've now opted into. And I'm really excited to get some feedback from some of you about what comes out of this for you. We are going to delve into the matter of creativity. And every week I'll have a guest with me, and I'll introduce you to Leanne in a moment. But firstly, to let you know that my name is Jane Turner, and I came to creativity very late in life. I would have sworn black and blue that there is not a creative bone in my body until well into my late 40s. So if that resonates with anybody, then I'm going to call you out on that. I think my mission is going to be to help you find your creativity, because it is such a wonderful journey when you take it on. And now to my wonderful guest today, Leanne Rogers, who has recently stepped up into the arena, as we call it, into the arena to become a published author. And we're going to go into Leanne's journey. And in fact, I'll start with a question for you, Leanne.
Thanks, Jane.
And I want you to just tell us what your take on creativity is. What is your definition of creativity?
Well, I actually swear by John Cleese's definition, so I wish I could claim it as my own, but he basically said that creativity is about bringing together seemingly distinct concepts in a way that solves problems. And so I see creativity on a broader level, so it's beyond sort of writing or painting or drawing, and it's actually just the way that we bring different ideas together, and because of our unique perspectives, everybody is creative, and I can't stress that enough, so yeah.
And would you say you have felt creative your whole life?
Just to the most part, yes. There is some, I mean, there's lots of academic research about it as well, but there's certainly a sense that Western traditional education does stifle creativity, and in terms of the criteria and the marking and the standardised testing. But yeah, for the most part, I'd say I've been pretty creative my whole life, and certainly in writing, that's been my passion for a very long time. So.
Well, you've just reminded me of one of my favourite TED Talks, which is by Ken Robinson, which is about how education stymies creativity. Now, that's not every piece of education, but standard, run-of-the-mill, Western-style education. And he shares this wonderful, wonderful story of being in a kindergarten class and just interacting with the kids. And there was one little girl who was deeply, deeply entrenched in a project that she was doing. And he said to her, "Oh, and what are you doing there? What is this that you're working on?" And she said, "Oh, well, I'm drawing God." And he said, "But nobody knows what God looks like." And her answer was such a cracker. She said, "Well, they will in a minute." So how wonderful are kids?
Yeah,
and
really.
Wow, if we can find ways to keep them connected. It's not about learning to be creative. It's about staying connected to one of your natural gifts.
Yeah, and I think a big part of creativity as well is that natural curiosity. So when we're kids, we do learn a lot by doing. One of my mentors at university a while back had a grandson who she gave the example of him sort of touching a lamp and saying, "Oh, it's hot," and by sort of experiencing the different feelings, you begin to learn, whereas that's definitely taken out of us as we grow older.
And I must share also what intrigued me about you, Leanne, when you, after we met at a networking event, and it was a very business-focused networking event.
It really was.
And you were presenting on behalf of the legal firm that you worked for, and I even forget what the content you were presenting was, but it was something to do with something about business.
Yeah,
it was about
so
legal employment law.
So employment relations law, so kind of the obligations that business owners have with regards to their employees and termination and so forth. But anyway, that's a very distinct topic.
But what is this now opens me up to perhaps asking you to say a little bit about how you describe yourself in terms of your varied range of activities.
Another one that I borrowed from the internet. Again, I wish I could have could have had the brains to come up with these. But Emily Wapnick, that's Wapnick, she has this brilliant TED Talk and recently launched a book called How to Be Everything. And she talks about these people with really diverse interests as being multi-potentialites. And basically they are the people that dabble in a little bit of everything and really, dive deep into a concept that they're excited about and then move on to the next one. And that also links back to that previous definition of creativity, because you're seeing different concepts and the divergence between those as well. So I definitely identify as a multi-potentialite. Yeah.
And as with many characteristics that we have as human beings, there is maybe healthy is not the right word. Why don't I use the word helpful? There is a helpful manifestation of that characteristic and a less helpful manifestation. And the problem, of course, that you then came to talk to me about in terms of getting your book written was difficulty focusing, because there are so many shiny objects out there.
Yeah.
And you had a wonderful cookie making business on the side, and this is the classic multi-potentialite, and that's a word I never even heard before, to be honest. And look, where to with your book then, in terms of what are you looking to expand into doing?
It's like I'm trying to keep my options open because of my nature that I pick up interests along the way. I really want to keep it open, but basically my book is called Inward and Upward, and the subtitle is Using Introspection to Elevate Your Experience of Everything. And it's basically about looking inwards and understanding your own story, and whether that's your upbringing and any potential traumatic experiences you've had, or positive experiences, and how they've shaped you in terms of your personality and your relationships as well. So I'm looking potentially getting into some creativity coaching, but really it just depends what comes off the back of that book. So that book will be out early 2018. I'm really excited for that. So.
Yes. Well, and creativity coaching, I've never heard anybody talk about that, because all of these niches within coaching, I'm a book writing coach, and that is an area that's becoming more crowded since I started doing it. Wouldn't you? What would you reckon that's going to happen, isn't it? But creativity coaching, I haven't heard that a lot of people do that, and you would be perfect at doing that.
Yeah, so another thing that sort of ties into the creativity coaching as well is around legal education. I know that they seem like very distinct subject areas, but my background is actually in law and communications, and so I've always been passionate about law, not so much the practice of it in terms of the old 6-minute interval and time billing and the long days, but certainly in terms of the actual intellectual kind of subject matter behind it. And so I recently gave a talk to students at Bondi University on the Gold Coast around creativity, and the subject was for a technology and legal practice sort of intensive, and I spoke about creativity as being the precursor to innovation, because at the end of the day, technology is informed by the way that different concepts come together to solve problems. And so I sort of left the students with a bit of advice about stay creative. So,
yeah, stay creative and stay open, I guess.
Absolutely.
Believe in the power of something that your mind doesn't necessarily completely control.
Absolutely, yeah.
And why that is my take on this is that I spent first, let's say, 45 years of my life pretty much operating in my head. There wasn't much that I was aware of below my neck. And as I think it was Ken Robinson again, who I'm now mentioning twice in the one.
Free publicity.
Well, why not? He deserves it. He's brilliant. Anyway, he said a great thing about, look, yes, my body was just really to take my head to meetings. Well, yes. Why not? That was the way I saw the world.
Absolutely.
To be perfectly honest. And my awakening came when my conscious mind, the business mind, took me into a coaching arena, and it was an idea to actually just develop my skills in helping people to step up, to go beyond where they thought they might otherwise be able to go. And the plan was to be working in the very safe confines that I had always worked in. My whole working life, in fact, up to the age of 52, was about working in the government.
Right.
And I just had that, there was something in me that pulled me to do some coaching qualifications, and that opened up, the onion skins started to come off, and I would, you know, as opposed to doing a course and thinking, okay, now I can go off and coach people, there was a very, very long gestation period where I had to deal with my own stuff. And was that, my God, the word painful, there might be a better word, but it was, I would come out of a coaching session of somebody that I took on as my coach and just think, where is this material coming from? Who is this basket case who's emerged from a 1 hour session with a person who barely said anything? It's the power of questions, and as a coaching tool, that is the tool that you want to have. And the questions that she asked me just brought so much of myself that I had kept locked away up to the surface. And it brings me to, again, another really, I guess it's an obvious coaching paradigm, but it was something I had no awareness of whatsoever. And it has to do with our shadow self.
Yep.
And I don't know if you remember, I talked about the curtain when we met.
Yes. Let's share that for the audience as well. 'Cause I think,
well, do you want to share your take on it? That would be, or would you like me to?
I think you're
all right. Well, let me just paint a picture for you, which is about thinking about a stage, and on the stage there will be a curtain. If you're the presenter or the performer, you'll be in front of the curtain. And what goes on behind the curtain is usually a tangle of wires, you know, a lot of mess that we don't want our audience to see. And we go through life, in fact, with a curtain that we might or might not be aware of. And the stuff we keep behind the curtain, especially when I was a very unaware, left-brained operator, were things that you don't want to be connected with, and you certainly don't want to own. And there'll be things like, let's rattle a few off: laziness, selfishness, stupidness. Oh my God, that fear of being found to not know everything and not be super, super smart. That was always a big one for me.
Syndrome.
Imposter syndrome. You know, it'll be other things that, if you were to name things that you have behind the curtain, what would they be, Leanne?
Oh, pretty heavy stuff. There's a lot of, I guess, repressed childhood trauma that came to light in a very similar fashion to what you were saying around the coaching experience of, you know, after 40-something years, really understanding, you know, what's happened to you and how that shaped you. And for me, behind my curtain for a long time was this shame around a childhood trauma that I'd experienced, and just the inability to be able to cope with it because I wasn't informed of the coping mechanisms and the ways that you could actually communicate through it. So basically it was about relearning and slowly peeling back those curtains and being able to share that story, and, you know, being comfortable enough to share behind the scenes. And I think it's something that, you know, it definitely takes time and a lot of practice in doing so. Yeah.
And I guess the word that we might put behind that, the part, yes, you didn't want the story exposed, but was it also about keeping the part of yourself that wasn't competent, for want of a better word? What is it? That you were the professional woman, being seen as being on top of everything, and anything that you weren't on top of is behind the curtain as well.
Yeah, I think rather than competent, I would actually use the word broken. I didn't want people to know about this really fractured history of mine, so much so that I actually covered it up by, in high school, striving for straight A's. I actually did 7 subjects when the standard workload was 6, and I also did a couple of university subjects as well. So really overloading myself and, you know, achieving academically, as well, to try and I guess push everything else behind the scenes so that people wouldn't know these deep, dark secrets about me. So,
yes.
yeah.
And look, curtains can be very effective, but they're exhausting to maintain. And I'm going to switch now from a pool scene. So we're not on a stage anymore. You're in a pool. And I want you to imagine that you've got a, what do we call them? We call them a beach ball. That's what we call them.
Ball, yep.
And of course they're full of air, so they float above the water. But let's say that for whatever reason for you, and these are your things behind the curtain, so they're now beach balls.
Okay.
Okay.
From curtains to beach balls.
Yes.
Okay.
Beach balls. You're in a pool, and you can hold a beach ball down.
You can.
No problem.
Yep.
So you've got not one beach ball, you've got two beach balls.
Oh dear.
So you're holding them both down. Already, your ability to do a lot of things is really stymied. Really stymied
limited.
by this. What if you've got more? And what if you get tired? And what if one pops up? Because you can't just... And they do.
They absolutely do.
They
in everything you do.
And, oh, my God, then the things that we do to compensate for that slight flaw, what we will call a flaw, what we do to then try and compensate for that flaw is, again, exhausting.
Absolutely. And it's an interesting, I guess, relationship as well, because there's also that sense of re-victimization in the case of trauma, where you repeat certain behavioural patterns because that's all you know. And I'm by no means a psychologist. Maybe one day I'll go back and study psychology.
Well, you probably will if you've still got the multi-potentialite
that's
tendencies.
The multi-potentialite tendencies there. So, so basically repeating certain behaviours that you might be stuck in because that's what you know and that's there. And I think that's another way of, I guess, dealing with the trauma when it starts to arise, is to really repeat that behaviour.
Yes. And why does all of this matter in the context of creativity? You might be wondering. Well, the thing is, there's the whole, need for some energy to generate creativity. And there's also, and especially with, I'll go back to book writing, the thing I know best, especially in terms of creativity and productivity, if you're holding bloody beach balls down the whole time, how are you meant to get it done? And of course the other thing that comes up with the beach ball scenario or with life in general, when we look at the lives that we lead and we look at how busy and or stressed we are, that is a creativity killer.
Really
Stress.
is. Absolutely.
And one big piece of the puzzle that I found out for myself in terms of what turned out to be a 5-year journey to get my book written, that really only needed more like 5 months and 5 years, but the important pieces of the puzzle fell into place along that 5-year journey. But the one that I want to mention to you now has to do with stress. Because what happens when we get stressed is that we're not operating from the part of our brain that we need to be operating from for any of our what we call the higher order thinking. So our languaging skills, our ability to organise our, in the case of writers, our content, our ability to remain focused and accountable. And the other word for accountability that I try not to use too much because people will switch off, but it's actually willpower. It's about putting the time in to get whatever that creative thing is that you're making. It's about actually getting down and doing it. And it's got to do with the part of the brain we're in again, because if we're operating through stress, we switch off the prefrontal cortex and all the higher order thinking areas. We go into the most primitive part of the brain, which is our limbic system. That's all about the fight or flight instinct.
Survival mode.
Survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, well, that part of the brain could not care less if you get your book finished or if you document all of the thoughts that you've got about what your painting is going to represent and how it's going to pan out. So from the point of view of creativity, if you notice yourself that you're blocked or just never getting to where you want to be, have a look at stress and have some strategies around how to pull yourself back out of that state and into the state where the juices start flowing again.
Absolutely. And I think today's society really does emphasise stress as a badge of honour. Being busy is sort of worn with pride. And I was actually talking to a friend of mine who's in a commercial law firm, and she was almost, I wouldn't say gloating, but she was certainly proud of the fact that she spent a day where she went into the office at 6 a.m. and left at 2 a.m. the following morning. And sort of, I think we identify, particularly when we live in the big cities such as Sydney or overseas, we really do identify as these hard-working people. But really, we should actually be working to live rather than living to work. And stress is a big part of that. So,
Yes. And what's just come up for me about stress and about the way that I used to operate is that getting out of that state, and it all came through the coaching training that I got, and the coaching training led me to a wonderful framework, resource, whatever you want to call it, and it's The Hero's Journey.
Oh, The Hero's Journey.
It's a wonderful book. Joseph Campbell wrote The Hero of a Thousand Faces, and it's about archetypes, essentially. It's about the monomyth, the fact that we are all much more the same than we are different, and about the fact that going on a journey, like writing a book, like climbing Mount Everest, whatever it is that your journey is, that involves answering a call of sorts.
The call to adventure?
Call to adventure.
I love that.
That's right. Yep. My call to adventure, the only one that I'm really conscious of, although in the background I can see a whole lot. Becoming a mother was a call to adventure for me, and man, was that a hero's journey. It is a hero's journey. But the whole writing the book thing was a hero's journey, and just when I needed to learn about this was when it fell into place. And I'd recommend, in fact, if anyone's wondering about this and thinking to get Joseph Campbell's book, it's a big read, but do that. But also, if you go onto YouTube and Google Hero's Journey, the first video that comes up is a wonderful TED Ed video. And it actually puts this framework through the movie The Hunger Games. Or I should say it puts the Hunger Games through the framework of the hero's journey. And the thing to do when you're watching that, or if you're watching the second one, and if Hunger Games doesn't resonate with you, the second one that comes up in the Google search, or in the YouTube search I should say, the second one that comes up looks at The Wizard of Oz, Harry Potter, Star Wars.
Is that the really beautiful animated video?
No, that's not the animated one. It's taking snippets from the movies.
But there is an animated one as well.
And you know, the part of that I needed to see, because with a hero's journey, and I won't try and explain this in a whole lot of depth, but let's say we've got a clock face. When you receive the call, you're at the 12 o'clock point. And we can certainly resist the call, but again, how much energy do you want to use avoiding who you really are?
Goes back to that holding the beach balls
down. That's the beach
analogy.
balls. Yep.
Yeah, not answering that call to adventure.
And so let's say you answer the call. As you move along, in one form or other, challenges are going to come. And there are times during the hero's journey where allies and teachers and helpers also arrive. And then beyond that point, so you're getting over a number of thresholds whilst you're doing your hero's journey. And at the 3 o'clock point, you go from the familiar world to the unfamiliar world. And as you progress towards 6 o'clock, it becomes very dark. And for me, that very dark place was when I had invested $30,000 on writing a book and the idea on learning how to write a book. The idea was I would leverage the power of being a published author to get free publicity to grow a coaching business that I could then leave my job in the government for and not go broke in the process.
That helps.
So, there I was, and I started this journey, and I went out of the familiar world. I went past the 3 o'clock point. By the time I got to the 6 o'clock point, which is a very dark place, as I said, I had been made redundant from the work that I'd done my whole working life up to the age of 52. So imagine that. I'm 52, I've been made redundant, I'd just gone into menopause, and my daughter had just gone into adolescence. So not only...
Perfect storm,
but talk about a creativity killer too, in terms
Absolutely.
of my stress levels were through the roof, the hormones in the house. Even our dog wanted to leave when Lucy and I went off often, as we did. Yeah. But anyway, there I was at the 6 o'clock point. And with that second video that you'll see, if you YouTube the words Hero's Journey, and as I say, there's the Star Wars filter that they put it through. That 6 o'clock point is when Luke is facing off with Darth Vader. And it is that time where there are no helpers. It is that time, it's the invitation for you to just dig deep and dig bloody deep. And I did, I had no options. And what bubbled up out of that changed my life forever.
Absolutely.
So I urge you to push through whatever it is that you think is stopping you from being creative. Because the size of the prize is enormous. Here I am now. I'm not in the boring government job. I love what I do. I come in on weekends. If anybody needs me, I'm there. I don't even really have weekends because I don't need them, because I don't really work anymore.
That's the thing, and it really ties back into that idea of when you're doing what you love, and once you pass that sort of 6 o'clock arc in the hero's journey, and you find your passion, you're happy to work almost every hour of the day. And just to reinforce what Jane was saying as well, I've called her at 10:30, 11:30 at night sometimes, just with a breakthrough idea, and she's been there to listen. So it's absolutely fabulous to work with someone that has found their purpose like that. So,
No, well it is. I haven't even remembered that you ring me at that time. I would say don't be ringing me at that time because I like to go to bed early, but there you go.
Sometimes you're there.
There you go. And so what is it that you're doing with your book? How would you describe your the connection you're trying to make with the book?
So I'm just really using that as a platform to, firstly, for personal growth, and really just to understand my own story and being more comfortable telling it. And that's something that comes with maturity as well. So I'm really using that as a tool to funnel through my thoughts and put them onto paper in a way that can help other people. I think particularly in the context of my book, which is all about introspection and self-awareness, there can be this confusion between self-absorption, which is often related to the millennial generation, this idea of being very vain and self-absorbed. But on the other end of the spectrum is this self-awareness, so understanding your conscious thoughts and why you do the things you do, and the insight behind the behaviour there. Just working through that at the moment and really promoting that message of self-awareness over self-absorption.
Fabulous. And what has changed for you since because what really happened is you got into your story.
I did.
That's the first part, actually, and you got into your story. So what's happened for you since then?
Well, it was sort of, again, talking about this 6 o'clock or this perfect storm. I was going through a bout of depression earlier this year, and it was pretty severe in terms of, I guess, the willpower to get up every morning and go to what at the time was my 9 to 5, and it was a sort of business development role, so I had to be in front of people a lot of the time and trying to convince people of the value of this service we were selling, and I physically couldn't do it. I would just sleep 12 plus hours and I'd just be teary all the time, and I really couldn't do that. And so it got to the point where I said, no, enough is enough. I need to quit my job. Much to the concern of my partner Sam, who was also between contracts at the time. Thanks for believing in me, Sam. But yeah, I just quit the corporate grind and said, okay, inward and upward, let's go.
Inward and upward.
Let's kind of focus on doing this book and writing this and really healing and understanding, and then from there I can actually focus on what it is that I want to be doing. And that goes back to that shiny object syndrome as well, in that being a multi-potentialite, you often get these diverse ideas and want to follow everything down the rabbit hole. And I guess tying it back into the rabbit hole, but tying it back into the hero's journey as well, if you do have diverse interests, you really do get multiple calls to action or calls to adventure.
Oh, yes.
And so you've got to be selective with which ones you take on, and I'm really glad that I took this one on and left the comforts of a 9-to-5 job and was able to structure my day around writing the book and focusing on my well-being, so mentally and physically. And there's a lot of power in having control of your own schedule, I think.
Yes. Oh, my God. And can I ask you also how much of the writing part, and whether it's about writing your book or writing in general, helps with depression or other creative, other creative things that you do, which you do an awful lot. I've never seen actually such a wonderful array of stationery in my life.
Or scrawled notes. I've actually got some here for the Facebook guys, but I've spilt some water on it and still looking away at those notes and scribbling. But yeah, to me, creativity is in every aspect of what I do, in the way I take notes, the way I prepare my meals. And it can sound a bit, I guess, corny or a bit wanky, but I really do think I'm creative in all sense of my lifestyle. And in terms of going back to your question about what does creativity do for you in terms of that healing process, it's really cathartic. We've all got our outlets, and we should all really be turning to them more so than other coping mechanisms like alcohol, drugs, when we are feeling that pressure or stress or depression. And so for me it was writing, and I was fortunate because one of my clinical psychologists a few years back, when I was going through this depression, and it seems to be a cycle as well, but one of my clinical psychologists actually got me writing as a way of getting rid of those thoughts and almost like purging all of the trauma that had been suppressed and pent up and really locked into that self-worth. And so writing for me has always been this key to unlocking what's going on in the subconscious and what's going on in my own head, even if I'm not physically aware of it just yet. Yeah, it's very, very cathartic process.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. And I had quite a different, or certainly the context was very different in terms of a cathartic experience to do with writing. My book that I've mentioned a couple of times, this is my first book. It's called Thrive in Midlife. And as I say, there I was, pretty bloody. Did I feel broken? I loved when you use that word broken. It's powerful in a negative way when we use it about ourselves. But yeah, I think I was feeling pretty broken. Anyhow, I was just going along writing a how to be well in this life phase type of book. And I got to the part where I was looking at my opportunities, options, whatever I call them, looking at my options for handling the symptoms of menopause versus the options that my mother had back in the day. And back in her day, a doctor would just automatically write out a prescription for synthetic hormones. And whilst I know there's a lot of controversy around this, so I won't delve into anything controversial here, but what I will say...
an argument on Facebook.
That's right. I don't want any haters. That's what I don't want.
Yep.
We'll talk about people pleasing in a moment as well. But I'm writing about my options for handling menopause versus my mother's options for handling menopause. And as I say, she got the prescription for the synthetic hormones, and ultimately, many years later, died of breast cancer. And in the book, I wrote these words. And the words were, I was grateful to tamoxifen, which was the drug that bought her 5 extra years after her diagnosis. And those 5 years gave her a chance to have 1 year with my daughter, and it gave my daughter one year worth of experience with her grandmother. She does remember that. Would you believe it? Yeah. She does remember that, and we have, of course, photos of them together. But the point of sharing this with you is that as I wrote that, I just felt something in my heart that I had never felt before. And what it was that my heart opened.
I've got goosebumps, Jane.
It opened. Not that it didn't open when my daughter was born, not that, but I had done a really, really good job of closing my feelings down. And there was no running and no hiding from the way that I felt in that very moment. And the fact that I had that, what I can only call a cathartic experience, has now left a trace in my body. So I can tap into that whenever I need to. Whenever I need to remember that I'm safe and I'm loved and the world is not an awful place. I now have that. I've got the muscle memory about it.
And that's so powerful as well, because it comes back to, and I think this conversation is very, very circular, and it interlinks really well all of the concepts that we've discussed, but that goes back to this idea of in survival mode, fight or flight, how do you get out of that? And being aware and having that muscle memory of, what feels good and how to open your heart to certain things, I think is really important in getting out of that stress mode. So,
lovely.
Very cathartic.
Lovely. And just reminding me of one of my favourite quotes from Albert Einstein. I've got a few of them, but his was that the most important decision you'll make on any day, I forget the exact words to be perfectly honest. Again, perfectionism bubbles up, doesn't it? But anyway, the most important decision you'll make on any day is whether you live in a hostile world or not.
And it really is all about perception and the way you see things, because you can see things as either a challenge or you can see them as an opportunity. And I think a lot of people today get stuck into that cycle of negativity and the pessimism bias. I'm actually writing about biases at the moment in that chapter that we've been talking about.
Pessimism bias.
Yeah, so this kind of notion that everything's bad, and you see one thing and it's like in the news, if it bleeds it leads, and so very morbid but very true.
Very true.
Yeah, so it's about tapping into those resources internally around what feels good for you and how to find hope. Yes, your book is a book about hope. In some ways, yeah, I'd say so. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah. And I mean, on that level, and on the fact that it's, I suppose this, again, a bit circular, isn't it? It brings me back to the problem with living your whole life in your head, is that you don't remember that your body knows. Your body knows what to do. And an easy, I use that word advisedly, but an easy way to get back into, tap back into that knowingness is just to slow down your breathing and just to really slow it down and to take the breath in nice and deep, draw it right in, and then just release it. Just release it. Do that a few times and your body will just take over, and that gets you right out of, as I said, the part of your brain that you don't want to be stuck in. Gets you out of your limbic system. And nothing at all wrong with the limbic system. It's like another great saying is, it's okay to have a meltdown. You just don't want to unpack and stay there. Limbic system is brilliant, and sometimes you actually need a burst of that life or death energy, whether it is a matter of life or death that you're dealing with. Occasionally that's really, really helpful, but it'll burn you out if you live there, if you stay there all the time.
That's it.
Yeah. Well, look, how are we going for time? We've got a few more minutes, Leanne.
Yeah.
What haven't I asked you that I should have?
I refer to my handy notes.
Refer to your notes.
I think we've covered pretty much all of it.
Okay.
But there was a note here to talk about the current creative projects that we're both working on.
Oh, yeah. You go first. I love that.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I'm currently working on, and those people that follow me on my Instagram, at Leanne Rogers, bit of a self-promotional plug there. But those people that follow me on my platforms might know that I am currently contributing to a book called The Art of Effective Communication. And that chapter that I'm writing about is all about how self-awareness really helps to help you better communicate with other people. So by understanding yourself and having that intrapersonal communication, that's INTRA, intrapersonal communication, you're then better able to manage relationships and communicate interpersonally, so INTER. And the brief said, don't use jargon, but my very academic, legal communications undergrad is really coming out here, and I'm using a lot of theories that I'm trying to explain, and I've had proofreaders look over that and go, what the hell are you talking about? So I've had to put it back in English to be a more effective communicator there. So that's what I'm working on at the moment, and I'm also looking through the potential of doing a Masters by Research next year. So a wonderful opportunity came up off the back of that talk around creativity and technology and legal practice for me to start exploring ways that we can inject creativity into legal education. And so that's a potential option we're looking at. But for the most part, the major creative project is the book, and it's about this thick at the moment, so we're getting there.
Oh, you're absolutely getting there.
I think we're about 40,000 words, so
nice.
Yeah,
nice
dense.
Yes.
Nice dense book. So,
yes.
Yeah, so
that's a great project.
Yeah.
I'm glad that's your project.
Yeah.
And we're on target with one of my other authors who will be one of my guests on this program. We're on target to launch our 3 books together in the beginning of 2018. Wow. And it's closer than we think. My next book is called Mindset for Authors, How to Overcome Perfectionism, Procrastination and Self-Doubt. But in fact, my big project is this radio show. I am going to hunt out the best guests that I can possibly find who will give you a different take completely on mine. We're a bit yin and yang. I've got some other people who are more yin and yang than even we are as a couple, and it's an invitation. In fact, is there such a word as provocation? There isn't, but I like to make up a word.
That's the term is to neologize is the verb for to make up words.
Okay, well it's a provocation to anybody listening who, a bit like I used to be, will say, oh yes, but I'm not one of those creative people.
Yeah.
Well. And
that goes back to that question that I did ask the students in my talk, and certainly something that I learned from a particular university mentor, Susie Ting, up at Bondi University. But she was talking about this. The question is not, are you creative? It's how are you creative? And the more we deny the fact that we are creative, the more we're letting ourselves down in terms of our potential. So.
And it is it's a beach ball.
It's a beach ball. There we go. Back to the conversation.
You're spending the energy on holding it down where... What could you do otherwise if you weren't holding that down?
So much,
it's the opportunities. It's about, that's right, it's about the opportunity cost of not doing what it takes to tap into those parts of yourself, and whether it's about creativity for you or not tapping into the parts that you're actively denying. Put it that way. So yes, maybe I'm not a good violin player or whatever, but that's never bothered me. I've never had to work really hard to not be worried about that. Whereas the whole book writing thing, it was just bugging the bejesus out of me. And there was my hero's journey.
So
it's what it is. So there'll be something for all of you out there who just feel agitated about something, and if you just go into that, sit with that, identify what it is, and then take some action.
And another way really to look at it is, what do you do when you should be working, or what do you spend your spare time doing? And if you're at work on Facebook, that's probably not your calling, but what are you spending your time doing? What do you procrastinate with? And really that's telling of what we are wired to do. Yeah.
And I'm going to loop back just before we wind up, which we'll have to do pretty soon. But I just want to loop back on something I said we would cover in the context of us just having this discussion, and it's people pleasing.
Oh yes, people pleasing. That's a big one.
What's your take on that, or how does that manifest in your life?
Okay, I'd say I am a people pleaser. I definitely spend a lot of time ignoring my own needs in order to, I guess, make other people happy, and that's only good for so long, but at the end of the day you really have to fill this resilience bucket of yours before you can start helping other people, because if the bucket is empty, you've got nothing to give to anybody else. And so there's a saying, morbid saying, I'm coming out with all these morbid ones today, but don't cut off your nose to spite your face, or don't set fire to yourself to keep other people warm, and that really, it's not so much about being selfish, because that comes with a lot of negative connotations, but it's really about self-care and putting yourself first to the point where you are then in a better place to help other people. And I guess the key, or the main place that we see that is on an aeroplane, when they say, fit your own oxygen mask before fitting other people's. That's not selfish, that's common sense. You've got to look after yourself first before you can help others. So.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. So.
Well, in my own case, I used to be a massive people pleaser, and I used to be also then repressing a whole lot of anger around the fact that why was nobody doing it for me, or why weren't they doing things around the house, for example, or wherever. And I've worked on that, and, gotten much better in that regard. Although I just caught myself before when I was mentioning about the hormones and saying, I don't want any controversy. And I remember when I was writing my book, it was still a problem for me. I was thinking, well, will I put that down, or is somebody going to draw a connection between that and themselves, and are they going to think I'm referring to them? And I was tying myself up in knots about it.
Sort of worry if you're going to trigger other people.
Yes. Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow. Now, look, you've given people an opportunity to be in touch with you if they like. Yeah. That's wonderful. And we can watch your progress in terms of getting that book finished, and your chapter that's coming out in another book soon. So
there'll be more info. There'll be more info about that on my website, leannejrodgers.com. So that's Rogers with no D. People, if you're interested, can follow me on Instagram at Leanne J. Rodgers, or shoot me an email, hello@leannejrodgers.com. And I'd love to hear people's insights as well. I've got a lot of really valuable contributors to my book, including my dad, the lovely Jane here. I've got Kate Carroll up on the Gold Coast. She's a life coach and does a lot of work around social media comparison, and plenty of other guests. And
you have the Commissioner for Mental Health, or somebody?
Yes, Nicole Gibson, the youngest Commonwealth Commissioner for Mental Health. Hi, Nicole, if you're watching. And the CEO of the Rogan Rouge Foundation, Nicole Gibson, has kindly written my foreword, and it gave me goosebumps the first time that I read it. So really excited to share.
Well, look, thank you for being with me today, Leanne.
Thanks for having me, Jane.
Oh, you've been the perfect inaugural guest for this series. If anyone wants to find me, be here at 9 o'clock Sydney time every Tuesday morning, or you can hop onto my website at writewithjane.com. But thank you for being with us. It's been wonderful, wonderful to talk to you, and I'd love to hear any questions you've got, any ideas you want to throw into the mix here about subjects within the context of creativity, because I'll be watching the Facebook, the messages on Facebook. So over and out for now.
Thanks, guys.